Welcome to the 114th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with New York Times bestselling writer John Sandford, author of the Prey series. His latest novel, Silk and Prey, is in bookstores now. Stay tuned for the interview. Well, welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is John Sandford, the New York Times bestselling writer of the Prey novels. The latest novel in the series, Silk and Prey, is in bookstores now. In addition to the Prey series, Sandford has written 6 novels in the Virgil Flowers series, and a 7th book will be published later this year. John, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, if someone listening hasn't heard about Silk and Prey yet, the latest Prey novel, how would you describe it?
Well, it's sort of my reaction to last year's election cycle, which I found to be extremely uncivil, ugly in a way that I really don't like, and that seems to have been the process for the last few elections, the last few national elections. And so what I did was I took a political situation, I pushed it to the extreme. I have a relatively young, 30-ish, very rich, attractive woman in Minneapolis who is running for the U.S. Senate. She's quite qualified for the job, but her problem is that with just a week to go to the election, she's losing. She has a narcissistic personality disorder. She may be a psychopath, and she definitely has a couple of thugs working for her. And what they try to do is they try to frame their Republican opponent with some child pornography. The governor, who is a liberal Democrat, grew up with the conservative Republican senator and simply doesn't believe it and thinks this is a step too far, that things have gone too far. So he asked Davenport to take a look at it. And Davenport begins to chip away at the pornography aspect of it, beginning to indicate that the Republican was not guilty of having child pornography, and that requires the young woman to take further steps to cover things up. Now she's in a cover-up mode, so that creates a series of violent acts, and that's where the story goes.
That's great. Well, you just mentioned that this was in reaction to kind of your reaction to kind of national politics and where things are headed in that realm. I was curious, when you're thinking about a new Prey novel, what's the process like? Do you think of ideas and reject them because you've written a similar novel, or do you keep a list of ideas that you'd like to write about in future Prey novels?
Well, the thing is that usually what I'm looking for actually is a good character. I'm looking for a good villain. The villain is the person who really sets the tone for the whole book. Davenport stays more or less the same throughout the series. I mean, he may evolve, but he doesn't. But the villain is the person that I have to find, and that has to be an interesting person. A lot of the times, I'm kind of working off the news, but not exactly off the news. For example, we have a situation recently of 3 young women who were captured or kidnapped 10 years ago or so and held captive by a man who held them in his house in Cleveland and raped them. I would take a look at something like that, and I would not actually think about doing a story that was similar to theirs. I wouldn't take 3 young women who were kidnapped and held. But what I might do is I might set up a situation where the guilty guy was either being freed on appeal or had escaped or somehow was out of prison, and then have the 3 women get together and start thinking about killing him. So I would have I would play off the news, and so what I do is I don't really look for them. I just since I read the papers all the time, I kind of absorb this stuff. and as I'm coming up to a new novel, I'm mulling over those various aspects of it. Who would make a great character, a great villain? What would be a complicated and interesting situation? And then I start working with that.
Gotcha. So you mentioned the appeal of the villain. I'm curious, given the longevity of the Prey novels and the Lucas Davenport, what is it about Lucas that continues to appeal to you as a character and as a hero?
Well, the thing about Lucas is that he is both unconventional, but he has a very direct sense of justice. He occasionally will do something that's illegal, technically illegal, but it's always in the search for justice. He doesn't do something illegal because, for personal profit or that kind of thing. If he does something illegal, it's because he's trying. He is looking to get justice for people who otherwise won't get it, and that, I think, is his appeal. We have a situation in this country where justice sometimes seems kind of remote, or a situation is so complex and so confusing you can't see your way through it. I mean, you look at the situation with the banks and with the housing crash, which devastated so many people's savings, and people have a feeling, I think, about that is that there was never any justice to it, that the people who brought down the economy actually got away with a lot of money and with their jobs intact, and in the meanwhile, millions of other people are suffering because of their actions. So I think there's this hunger for some sense of justice. I think you also see that in the superhero films that are so popular today, where people who are extremely unconventional and a little weird and a few other things fight with people who are just very exploitive, violent, and who have a sense of entitlement, and they're going to get away with something, and so they have to be brought to justice by unconventional means because the system itself doesn't seem to do that anymore. So that's what Lucas does. He cuts through a lot of the systemic problems to arrive at some semblance of justice. Now, he doesn't always get there, and in Silk and Prey is one of those cases where he might not get to where he wants to go.
Sure. Sure. Well, I mentioned earlier your Virgil Flowers series. What was the process like when you started working on the first Virgil Flowers novel? How did you decide to create a new series featuring him?
Well, one of my problems with the Davenport series was that Davenport got married. Now, the thing about that is that most people, including men and women, like to see the beginning of a sexual relationship in a book. Most books have the beginning of a sexual relationship in them. A lot of books begin with the death of a spouse, followed by the beginning of a new sexual relationship. Well, the thing about Davenport is that he had, as we got longer and longer into the series, a lot of sexual relationships, and he's sort of a harsh guy, and what it was beginning to look like as we strung this out longer and longer was that he was a sexual predator in some ways. My original thought was to bring Virgil Flowers into the series as kind of a junior partner to Lucas, and have Virgil have kind of he'd be an intelligent guy and a hardworking guy and a guy who was very efficient as a cop, but he was also be a guy who would bring a lighter sense of sexuality to the whole series, that he would essentially replace Davenport so that you could begin to see again in the Davenport series a sense of boy meets girl kind of thing, and but he was successful enough that I wound up spinning him off as a book on his own, which leaves me again with that original problem, what to do about Davenport and with sex in the Davenport books. And I haven't really solved that problem. But the Flowers books are doing quite well on their own, so I'm continuing those.
That's great. That's great. Well, I know before you launched your career as a best-selling novelist, you worked as a newspaper reporter, including winning a Pulitzer Prize in 1986. When you were working in journalism, were you also writing fiction on the side? Did you write novels while you were during your journalism career?
Yeah, I did. I wrote a couple of them, and they weren't published. It takes a while to make the transition, even if you have an inclination and a strong urge to write fiction. It takes a while to get out of the journalism mode, so to speak. Journalism is a very condensed form of writing, and what you have to do is you have to learn to relax. You still have to keep the writing clear. You have to keep the writing fluid, but you have to really relax it and learn to take a little bit of space rather than write in that very condensed fashion. Some people have a very hard time doing that, and so they may try to write books, but their books wind up being, a third of the length they should be, and extremely condensed and very hard to read. Writing fiction becomes a learning process. I still do a little bit of journalism. I went to Iraq about 4 years ago and flew with Air Assault Battalion for an online news outlet in Minneapolis. And I also did some coverage of the 2008 political conventions in St. Paul for the same outlet, just because I still enjoy doing that. But it is a different kind of writing and a different process.
And how do you think your journalism writing impacted your work as a novelist?
Well, it wasn't so much the writing itself; it was the career. The thing is that the reason that a lot of journalists who have an inclination toward writing fiction, people like Michael Connolly, and even people like Lee Childs, to a certain extent, who work in the media, although not directly in news, I guess. Mm-hmm. The reason that we do well is because the career ships us around to look at a lot of different situations. So I've looked at a lot of cops. I've been in a lot of emergency rooms. I actually did quite a bit of medical writing at one point in my life. And as a general assignment reporter, you're shipped around and you see a lot of these things, and it gives a certain veracity, I guess you'd say, to the scene setting that you do in your books. So you know what cops look like and what they talk like and how they behave around a crime scene and that kind of thing. So it sort of grounds you. It gives you a background for doing the writing.
Sure. Sure. Well, given all of your success to date with your novels, what advice would you have for aspiring fiction writers who may be listening?
Well, one of the things you have to do is you have to persist. As I said, I was working as a journalist for a long time, and I was getting daily advice on writing from the copy desk, and a lot of it was bad, I suppose, but they push you and they edit you, and they're looking at your stuff every day, and then you go to trying to write fiction, and you have to learn to persist at it. You can't, it is a learning process. You're not going to learn it the very first time you do it. So you have to kind of just, I guess that was the thing, is that if you really think that you've got it to do it, you've got to persist at it. And the other thing, I guess, is that you just can't sit in your basement. You've got to go out and look at the world. If you really want to do a good piece of writing, one of the best pieces of writing that you've ever done, and you're a beginner, go out to a bar or to a busy place, and then simply describe it. Just write down what you see. Try to write nice paragraphs, but write down what you see, and you will find that the writing is very good. Almost inevitably, it's very good piece of writing, and you'll be surprised at how good it is. If you just do that one exercise, all of a sudden things will sort of open up for you.
That's good advice. So when you're working on your novels, do you outline extensively, or are you more of an organic writer in terms of plot?
I do not outline extensively at the beginning of the book. What I do is I come up with my villain, I come up with a situation, and then I begin kind of a searching process to get Davenport through it. When we're doing this kind of thing, you understand is that we're taking months to do it, and we're thinking about it every single day. So it's not like reading a book where you experience it in a matter of hours. We're doing it, and so we can go back and forth, and we can patch things and rewrite them and redo them, and then move forward again. And so it's a searching process for me. My books are around 100,000 words long, more or less. I mean, they may be a few thousand words more than that, but basically right around 99 to 100,000 words long. When I get to about 80,000 words, at that point, I know how the book is going to end, and then I do outline. I will lay down an outline to the end that is not really extensive, but what I want is when I'm at the end of a book, I don't want that searching quality anymore. What I wanted to do was all of a sudden I wanted to lurch into a run and then run faster and faster until we get to the end.
Right.
And outlining helps that.
Gotcha. And in terms of like the police procedure, given the topics of the novels and the settings, at this point, do you have anyone anyone affiliated with a police department read the novel before it's published? Just in terms of some of those details.
I actually I don't let anybody read the novel except my partner Michelle and my son. But the thing is that I do not get very deep into police procedure in my books. There's like a range of reality in police novels. Michael Connelly, for example, is probably the closest prominent writer now who writes sort of what police procedure and police action is really like.
Sure.
Mine is a little more movie-like. Davenport does not spend a lot of time writing reports. He is mostly out there running around with a gun. So he is a little less realistic, say, than Michael Connelly. None of us are realistic because cops just don't on their own, solve intricate murders. There's usually a lot of background support and a lot of talk going on back and forth, and a lot of people working together, and that's hard to do with a fictional hero. So Connelly will write, his Harry Bosch. Harry will be doing things pretty much on his own. Lucas does things pretty much on his own with some help from, Jenkins and Shrake and Dell and Virgil every once in a while. But basically it's his case and he does it, and that's not particularly realistic anymore.
Sure. So what are you working on now?
I'm sitting here looking as we're talking. I am writing stuff on the front blank pages of a Virgil book that I am in the process of doing the final cleanup on. I've got a lot of cleanup to do, and it's got to be done by the 15th, which I think is 3 days from now. The 15th to the 16th, it's got to be in New York. It's going to take me probably 6 hours just to type in the changes that I've got written in here. This is about my fourth pass through the book. Virgil books are a little shorter than the Davenport books, so they go quickly, or more quickly with the cleanup. But it's still going to be a chore.
Gotcha. Well, again, we've been speaking with John Sandford, the best-selling writer of the Prey novels featuring Lucas Davenport. Sandford's latest novel, Silk and Prey, is available in bookstores now. John, thanks for doing the interview.
Yeah, you're welcome.